My father left everything to my cousin, till the judge read the handwritten note he tried to hide. Introduction. For 5 years, I worked alongside my father building Morrison Construction into one of Arizona's most respected companies. When Frank Morrison died of cancer, I expected to inherit the business we'd built together. After all, I had the construction management degree, the hands-on experience, and years of planning our future expansion. Instead, my cousin Derek, a software salesman who hadn't been on a construction site in decades, inherited everything. $8.5 million, gone to someone who'd barely visited Dad during his illness. The will reading was devastating, but something felt wrong. Dad had been heavily medicated during his final months, and Derek's sudden interest in helping Uncle Frank seemed suspicious. When I found a handwritten note hidden in Dad's favorite book, it led me down a path that would expose a shocking truth. Derek hadn't just inherited my father's fortune, he'd stolen it through systematic elder abuse. But Dad had been smarter than either of us realized, leaving behind evidence that would bring his manipulative nephew to justice and restore the legacy that was rightfully mine. This is the story of how a dying man's hidden camera exposed a family predator, and how sometimes the most important inheritance isn't money, it's proof that someone believed in you all along. The probate courtroom in downtown Phoenix felt like a furnace despite the air conditioning running at full blast. I sat beside my lawyer, Patricia Chen, watching my cousin Derek adjust his expensive tie as his attorney shuffled through papers. 3 months after my father's death, we were finally here fighting over an inheritance I never thought I'd have to fight for. Dad had been a successful contractor who'd built half the housing developments in Scottsdale over 30 years. Frank Morrison was known for his honesty, work ethic, and devotion to family, which made what happened after his funeral completely incomprehensible to anyone who really knew him. The will reading had been a nightmare. Derek, my cousin who'd barely spoken to Dad in 15 years, inherited everything. The construction company worth $8.5 million, the ranch house on 40 acres outside the city, the investment portfolio, even Dad's collection of vintage trucks that he'd spent decades restoring. I got nothing. Your Honor, Derek's lawyer Mr. Hoffman was saying, the will is clear and unambiguous. Frank Morrison left his entire estate to Derek Morrison, his nephew, with no provisions for his daughter Emma. Judge Rodriguez looked over her glasses at the documents, and this will was properly witnessed and notarized. Yes, Your Honor. 2 witnesses, both employees at Mr. Morrison's company, witnessed him sign this document 6 months before his death. I felt sick listening to it. 6 months before Dad died, he'd been battling cancer, in and out of the hospital for chemotherapy. I'd been there for every appointment, every treatment, every sleepless night when the pain was too much. Derek had visited exactly twice, once when Dad was first diagnosed, and once for the funeral. The thing was, Dad and I hadn't just been close, we'd been business partners. For 5 years, since I'd graduated from Arizona State with a construction management degree, I'd been working beside him, learning every aspect of the business. He constantly talked about our future plans, about expanding into commercial construction, about the legacy we were building together. 2 weeks before he died, despite the morphine and exhaustion, he'd squeezed my hand and said, Emmy, everything I've built is for you. You're going to take this company places I never could. Your Honor. Patricia stood up. We're contesting this will, based on evidence of potential fraud. We've discovered that Mr. Frank Morrison wrote and signed a different will just 3 weeks before his death, a will that was never filed with the court but represents his true final wishes. That's impossible, Hoffman interjected. Our will is dated 6 months ago. That's just it, Patricia said. This will wasn't filed through proper channels. We believe it was deliberately concealed. Derek's face went pale, his nervous fidgeting increasing. Last week, while preparing to vacate the property Derek inherited, Emma made a discovery. A handwritten will, hidden inside a book in Frank Morrison's personal library. A will that leaves everything to Emma, and specifically nullifies any previous wills. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Derek was whispering furiously to his lawyer. Judge Rodriguez examined the paper carefully. Ms. Morrison, when did you discover this document? 5 days ago, Your Honor. I was packing Dad's books when it fell out of his copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Derek stood up abruptly. This is clearly a desperate attempt to overturn a legitimate will. Emma's had access to that house for months. She could have written that note herself. Derek, I said, facing him, why would Dad change his will to favor you, then change it back 3 weeks later. What happened during those months that made him reconsider? Don't answer that, Derek's lawyer warned. But Judge Rodriguez was studying Derek's face carefully. Mr. Derek Morrison, this handwritten document suggests your uncle felt coerced into signing the first will. It mentions specific dates when you visited him in the hospital. Were you aware that your uncle had written a second will? Derek's voice cracked. No, Your Honor, of course not. I watched his composure crumble and knew we were on the right track. Judge Rodriguez recessed court for investigation, and 3 days later, issued a court order for access to Dad's home. Derek was furious but couldn't legally refuse the sheriff's escort. Standing in Dad's office for the first time since his funeral felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same. His reading chair by the window, construction blueprints, rolled neatly in their rack, his coffee mug still sitting where he'd left it. Derek paced nervously while his lawyer and 2 sheriff's deputies watched me approach Dad's massive oak desk. This is harassment, he muttered. Uncle Frank never mentioned any hidden compartments or secret documents. I ignored him and pulled out the second drawer. At first glance, it looked normal, filled with pens, paper clips, and office supplies. But when I pressed along the edges, like Dad had taught me as a child, I felt the familiar click of the release mechanism he'd used to hide my birthday presents. The false bottom popped up, revealing a compartment beneath. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. The first photo made my blood run cold. It showed Derek in Dad's hospital room, holding papers in front of Dad while he lay unconscious, an oxygen mask over his face. The timestamp read October 13th to 47 p.m. The second photo showed Derek guiding Dad's limp hand to sign something while Dad's eyes were closed. October 13th, 3:15 p.m. The third showed Derek taking papers out of Dad's nightstand and replacing them with different documents. October 14th, 11:23 a.m. Oh my God, I whispered, my hands shaking. Derek had gone completely white. Those ... those are fake. Someone doctored those photos. But I was staring at the timestamps, the pieces finally falling into place. Dad had a security camera, I said. He installed a small camera in his hospital room because he was worried about his medications going missing. It was taking pictures automatically every few minutes. I found the USB drive at the bottom of the compartment, along with a manila envelope labeled for Judge Rodriguez. Derek made a move toward the desk, but one of the deputies stepped in front of him. Derek Morrison, the deputy said, pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. As they read Derek his rights, I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a detailed letter in Dad's handwriting, documenting every one of Derek's visits, every threat, every moment of manipulation. But the last paragraph was what made me cry. Emmy, I know I wasn't strong enough to fight Derek when I was sick and scared, but I want you to know that every day I was proud of the woman you became. You were the best business partner I ever had, and you'll be the best construction company owner this city has ever seen. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong in this business. You belong here more than anyone I've ever known. The company is yours. It always was. Love, Dad. Derek was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. As I held Dad's final letter, I realized that his greatest gift wasn't just the inheritance, it was the proof that he'd never stopped believing in me, even when he'd been too weak to fight for what was right. The courtroom was packed when Judge Rodriguez reconvened to hear the new evidence. Word had spread through Phoenix's construction community, and half the contractors in the city had shown up to see how the Morrison case would end. Derek sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, having been denied bail. His new lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Your Honor, District Attorney Rebecca Walsh addressed the court. The evidence recovered from Frank Morrison's home office definitively proves that Derek Morrison obtained the October 15th will through elder abuse and fraud. The large screen displayed the security camera photos. These images show Derek Morrison manipulating an unconscious cancer patient into signing legal documents. The timestamps correspond exactly with hospital visitor logs and medication schedules, proving Frank Morrison was heavily sedated during these visits. I watched the photos flash across the screen, feeling sick again. In one image, Derek was literally holding Dad's hand around a pen, guiding it across a signature line while Dad's head lolled to the side, clearly unconscious. Furthermore, the USB drive contains over 40 hours of security footage showing Derek Morrison's systematic manipulation over a 3-month period. Judge Rodriguez turned to Derek's lawyer. Does your client wish to respond? The lawyer stood reluctantly, but Judge Rodriguez cut him off. I'd like to hear from Mr. Derek Morrison himself. Sir, you've seen the photographic evidence. Do you have any explanation for what these images show? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, his composure finally cracking. Your Honor, Uncle Frank was dying. He was confused, scared, in pain. I was trying to help him understand that the business needed to go to someone who could actually run it, by forcing him to sign documents while he was unconscious. He wasn't always unconscious. Sometimes he was awake, and we talked about the future of the company. Mr. Morrison, Judge Rodriguez said sternly, I've reviewed 40 hours of security footage. In not one single recording do I see your uncle awake and alert during your visits. The footage shows you checking to make sure he was unconscious before removing documents from his nightstand. Derek's mask completely fell away. You don't understand. Emma doesn't know anything about running a real business. She's got some college degree, but I've been in sales for 15 years. I know how to manage people, how to make deals by manipulating dying relatives. Uncle Frank was sentimental about her because she's his daughter, but that doesn't mean she's qualified to judge. Rodriguez cut him off. Your uncle spent 5 years training his daughter to take over his business. She has a construction management degree and hands-on experience. You work in software sales and haven't set foot on a construction site in decades. Testimony followed from Dad's employees, confirming I'd been essentially running Morrison Construction for 2 years. Dr. Williams, Dad's oncologist, delivered the most damning testimony. I specifically noted that Frank Morrison was not competent to make major decisions during October 10th through 20th due to medication-induced cognitive impairment. I told Derek Morrison this directly. Judge Rodriguez's verdict was swift. Derek Morrison systematically manipulated a dying man and attempted to steal an inheritance. The handwritten will represents Frank Morrison's true final wishes. Derek Morrison is sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. 2 years later, I stood at Morrison Construction's new headquarters, watching our crew break ground on the Phoenix Children's Hospital expansion, the largest commercial project in company history. The 18-month project would employ 47 workers, more than Dad had ever managed at one time. We'd expanded beyond Dad's wildest dreams. Morrison Construction had pioneered sustainable building practices and became Arizona's first minority woman-owned construction company, certified for major state contracts. The business Dad built with his reputation, I was building further, with innovation and inclusion. I'd kept Dad's old office exactly as he'd left it, adding only a framed copy of the handwritten will that saved our legacy. Sometimes when working late, I'd look at his handwriting and remember his final words, "You belong here more than anyone I've ever known." Derek had been released after serving 3 years, but moved to Nevada. He'd never contacted me, and I was grateful. Some betrayals run too deep for forgiveness. The real surprise had been discovering Dad's other plans. Hidden in his files were detailed notes about establishing a scholarship program for women pursuing construction management degrees. He'd already set aside $500,000 for the fund but never told me. The Frank Morrison Memorial Scholarship was now, in its 2nd year, supporting 12 young women at Arizona State. 2 worked as summer interns for Morrison Construction, learning the business from the ground up like I had. Ms. Morrison, Jennifer Walsh, one of our interns, approached with excitement in her eyes. "The concrete pour for Section C is perfect. Mr. Bradley said you taught him that inspection technique." I smiled. "Actually, my dad taught me that technique. I'm just passing it along. Could you show me? I want to learn everything before I graduate." As I explained the inspection process Dad had taught me 20 years ago, I realized something profound. Dad's legacy wasn't just the business or money he'd left me. His legacy was the knowledge he'd passed down, the standards he'd set, and the belief that good work speaks for itself. That evening, reviewing contracts for 3 new projects, my phone rang. Patricia called about Derek filing a motion to appeal his conviction. "Probably nothing substantial," she assured me. "Just a desperate attempt to avoid paying restitution." After hanging up, I pulled out Dad's copy of To Kill a Mockingbird and reread the passage he'd underlined about understanding people from their perspective. Derek still believed he'd been wronged, that he deserved Dad's legacy more than me. But Derek never understood that a legacy isn't something you steal. It's something you earn through years of proving yourself worthy of someone's trust. Dad didn't leave me his business because I was his daughter. He left it because I'd earned it. Every successful project, every satisfied client, every young woman I mentored proved Dad's faith was justified. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build on Dad's foundation. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of everything we'd built together, I finally understood his final letter. The company wasn't just mine because he'd left it to me. It was mine because I'd helped build it into something worth inheriting. And that was a legacy no one could ever take away.